I came home early from a business trip to find my husband's stuff gone. My sister was in my kitchen and said, "He's with me now. We're in love." I laughed and replied, "Perfect. Because the prenup you both signed just made you eligible for courtroom drama and public humiliation." The one who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, who showed up to Thanksgiving with actual homemade cranberry sauce instead of canned jelly, who made sensible career choices and married a man who looked good on paper, steady job, straight teeth, reasonably polite to waiters. My name's Leona Barrett, and if you had asked anyone 2 years ago who among the Barrett sisters had her life the most together, they'd have pointed at me without hesitation. I wasn't flashy. I didn't chase attention. I liked quiet cafes, hydrangeas, and neat budgets. I also liked control. Not the overbearing kind, not in a cut the crust off my sandwich or I'll lose it kind of way, but in the quiet, steady way that makes people feel safe around you. People came to me with their problems. Marin especially. Marin, my younger sister by 5 years, was always the wild one. She wore eyeliner to family dinners and dyed her hair a different color each season. She switched majors 3 times in college, dropped out her junior year, and never seemed to stay in one place, or with one person, for long. Still, we were close. Even with all our differences, she was still my sister. There were sleepovers on my couch when she broke up with yet another guy who didn't treat her right. There were long texts late at night where she'd spiral and I'd talk her down. I never resented it, not really. It felt like my role. I was the anchor. She was the kite. But even anchors don't expect to be drowned. The shift began so quietly I didn't even notice it at first. It was sometime in early spring. Seattle was still gray, as usual, but the cherry blossoms had started blooming along the sidewalks of Capitol Hill. I remember walking home one day and thinking how much I loved that smell, the faint sweetness in the air mixed with damp concrete and coffee. I had just come off a huge project at work. The kind that keeps you running on caffeine and adrenaline and makes you forget to eat dinner for 3 nights straight. When I finally emerged from the fog of deadlines, I realized Clint had been distant. Not obviously. Not in a movie way where he forgot anniversaries or stopped saying, "I love you." He still kissed my cheek when he passed behind me in the kitchen. Still brought me my favorite miso soup when I worked late. But something was off. His eyes didn't linger as long. He laughed less. And he started leaving the house more. "I'm getting serious about CrossFit again," he'd say, tugging on those same worn-out Nikes and grabbing his gym bag. I didn't question it. We'd been together for almost 7 years, married for 3. I figured it was just a phase. Everyone goes through ruts, right? Maybe he was bored. Maybe we needed a trip. I even started planning one. A weekend up at Lake Crescent Lodge, something cozy. I thought if we just slowed down and breathed the same air for more than 2 hours a day, we'd reconnect. I thought it was something fixable. It wasn't. I got called to Dallas on short notice in May. A client was panicking over some materials we were sourcing for a transit project. The kind of thing that would blow over in a week, but in that moment felt like an emergency. My manager was supposed to go, but her daughter had the flu. So I stepped in. I packed fast. Clint barely looked up from his laptop. "You'll be back by Sunday?" "That's the plan," I said, brushing his shoulder as I passed. "Text me when you land." I did. He replied with a thumbs up. Day 2 in Dallas, something strange happened. I came back from the client site to find my hotel keycard deactivated. At the front desk, the woman frowned at her screen and said, "You checked out already, ma'am?" "No," I said, confused. "I've been out since 8 a.m. She apologized, reactivated the card, and I brushed it off as some system glitch. But something about it stayed with me. The rest of the evening, I kept checking my phone, even though Clint hadn't messaged. I sent a casual "Hey, miss you," and got a simple "You too." It felt thin, like a reply typed while someone else was watching. I flew back early. The client calmed down faster than expected, and I decided to take advantage of the free weekend. I didn't tell Clint. I figured I'd surprise him. Maybe stop by Pike Place Market and grab fresh pasta. Make dinner. Try again. It was raining when I got back to Seattle, not that I minded. I'd grown to find comfort in it. The Uber pulled up outside our house. I remember thinking how quiet everything seemed. No lights on. No music drifting from the kitchen. I opened the door. It was clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that comes not from tidying, but from erasing. I walked through the house slowly. Clint's shoes were gone from the entry. His jacket missing from the hook. His guitar stand in the living room was empty. So was the small ceramic bowl by the stairs where he always tossed his keys. That bowl was a wedding gift. I stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. My throat felt tight. Not like I was going to cry. More like I couldn't speak even if I wanted to. Then I heard someone in the kitchen. I turned the corner. And there was Marin. She was barefoot. Comfortable. Like she belonged there. My hoodie was hanging off her shoulder, the one I'd worn camping in Leavenworth with Clint the year before. Her hair was damp, like she'd just showered. She looked up and froze. There was a pause long enough to hear the refrigerator hum behind her. "You're early," she said. I looked around again. The sink was clean. 2 coffee mugs sat side by side on the counter. Mine were all still in the cabinet. I didn't ask the obvious. I just said, "Where's Clint?" Her face didn't move, but her eyes dropped for a moment. And then she said it. "He's with me now. We're in love." My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't even pain. It was disbelief. Almost amusement. Because it was so stupid. So surreal. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Then I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Perfect. Because the prenup you both signed just made you eligible for courtroom drama and public humiliation." Her face turned white. I walked out. There are moments in life where time fractures. Before and after. That was my fracture point. Before, I was the one who kept the peace. Who forgave easily. Who made excuses for other people's pain. After, I became someone else. Someone who stared down betrayal and decided she wouldn't crumble from it. I didn't cry that night. I poured a glass of wine, sat in the guest room of a friend's house, and opened my laptop. Pulled up the prenup. Reread every line. Highlighted key sections. Sent an email to my lawyer with the subject line, "Time to move." And that was just the beginning. There's something profoundly unsettling about being blindsided by people you trust. It unhooks something in your brain. Your memories don't feel safe anymore. Suddenly, everything you ever recalled with warmth becomes a crime scene. For days after that night, I couldn't stop replaying things in my head. Every conversation, every glance, every damn Christmas dinner where Marin had sat across from Clint, smiling, laughing, pouring him more wine, leaning just a little too close. At first, I didn't want to believe it had been going on for long. Maybe a month. 2, max. But denial is a generous liar. The truth unfolded like rot beneath fresh paint. The clues were everywhere, once I let myself see them. A receipt in the console of Clint's old Subaru from a boutique bed and breakfast in Port Townsend, dated 3 months back, on a weekend I'd been in Vancouver for a conference. Marin had told me she was dog-sitting for a friend that weekend. A text from Clint on my birthday that read, "Wish I could be there to celebrate, but I owe the guys a ski weekend." That same weekend, Marin hadn't responded to my call. Said she had a migraine. Even the couch throw, a soft blue wool one I kept in the living room, smelled faintly like Marin's perfume when I grabbed it the week after everything happened. That citrusy lavender mix she'd worn since college. They weren't even trying that hard to hide it. They just knew I wouldn't look. I kept my composure because I had to. Work didn't stop. Clients didn't care that my husband had turned my life into a soap opera. I showed up every day, smiled when I needed to, and then drove home to a hollow house that echoed more than usual. People asked questions. My assistant, Nico, was the first. "You okay, boss? You've been kind of quiet." I nodded, smiled, and said, "Just working through some stuff." And he left it there, which I appreciated more than I can say. I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not out loud. But I did call my lawyer. Her name is Joanna Bly. Mid-50s. Short gray hair. Zero patience for small talk. She remembered the prenup like it had been signed last week. "Tell me what happened," she said without preamble. I did. Sparingly. No tears. Just facts. She clicked her tongue when I mentioned Marin. "Well, they're idiots," she said. "Because if what you're telling me is true, they've just walked into a buzzsaw." I told her I had some evidence. She asked me to gather everything I could. Paper trail, photos, texts, shared expenses, anything that shows overlap during your marriage. "Do you think it'll hold?" She didn't hesitate. "With the way we structured it?" "Oh, it'll hold." The thing is, I didn't want revenge. Not in the beginning. I wanted understanding. An explanation. I wanted Clint to sit across from me and say, "I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." I wanted Marin to say, "It wasn't supposed to happen. I got caught up. Please forgive me." But neither of them did. Instead, they doubled down. I found out through mutual friends that they'd moved into a loft in Fremont, pretending like this was just the start of a great love story, posting filtered brunch photos and inside jokes. Marin even changed her Instagram bio to Sparkles Love is Unexpected Sparkles. The audacity. About 2 weeks after I filed, I saw them. It wasn't planned. I was at PCC Market grabbing groceries. Turned the corner near the deli, and there they were, giggling over a tray of olives like teenagers. Clint saw me first. He froze. Marin followed his gaze and her face paled. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. I stared at them for maybe 3 seconds. No words. Just the weight of what they did hanging in the air between us. Then I walked away. That night, Clint called me. It was late, almost midnight. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I picked up. "Leona," he said, voice low. I waited. He didn't know what to say. I could hear him breathing, trying to summon courage. I didn't plan for this to happen. Still, I said nothing. I know I screwed up. But it wasn't malicious. I almost laughed again. That word, malicious. Like I was a corporate policy violation. "She's my sister, Clint," I finally said. A long silence. "I know," he whispered. Then I hung up. The legal process moved slowly. Joanna filed the petition. Clint's attorney, some eager guy named Brent, responded with the usual boilerplate, disputes the infidelity claim, requests mediation. Joanna rolled her eyes. "He's stalling, trying to wear you down." But I didn't wear down. Every week, I found more pieces. Screenshots. Old iMessages from my iPad that synced without Clint realizing. A boarding pass stub from a weekend Marin told me she was visiting a friend in Bend. But the flight was to Burbank, where Clint had gone for a tech summit. Piece by piece, the story came together. And it was ugly. One night, I went to my parents' house in West Seattle. They'd been out of town when the whole thing blew up, visiting relatives in Florida. I didn't tell them at first. Didn't know how. But when my mom called to ask if Clint was coming to Dad's birthday dinner, I finally said, "We're separated." He left. For Marin. There was silence on the other end. Then just a faint, "Oh, honey." I showed up 2 days later. My mom hugged me longer than she ever had. My dad poured me a glass of whiskey and sat beside me in the sunroom without saying a word. He just nodded, once. Sometimes silence says everything. Marin hadn't spoken to them since. Apparently she thought they'd side with her. That blood ran thicker than morality. But betrayal runs thicker still. A month later, I got an email. From Marin. No subject line. Just a few lines of text. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think it would go this far. Please don't hate me." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't open a wound wider. Besides, apologies made after consequences aren't really apologies. They're just regrets dressed in desperation. The court date was approaching. Joanna was in her element, crisp suit, stacks of paperwork, voice like a scalpel. Clint and Brent had started pushing for private arbitration. They were afraid of a public scene. I wasn't. I wanted it public. I wanted people to hear the details. The timeline. The receipts. Not for spite. For truth. And the truth, when it landed, was heavier than I expected. Not just because of what they did, but because of what I allowed myself to ignore for so long. The distance. The excuses. The instincts I silenced in favor of keeping the peace. But not anymore. I don't know what I thought it would be, colder maybe, more dramatic. But it was just a beige room with uncomfortable chairs and that faint institutional smell like old paper and anxiety. Clint sat 2 rows ahead of me with his lawyer. I hadn't seen him in weeks. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the suit, he always wore them like they didn't quite fit. Marin wasn't there. She wasn't part of the legal contract, at least not directly. But I knew she was following everything. Probably reading the updates over his shoulder. Maybe even whispering advice like she used to when we were kids cheating at Monopoly. Joanna leaned over and tapped a folder in front of me. "This," she whispered, "is the knife. Be ready when we twist." I nodded. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. We started with the basics. Proof of marriage, proof of assets, timelines. Clint's lawyer, Brent, young, smug, and overly enthusiastic, tried to paint our marriage as emotionally distant. "Unraveled naturally," he said. "Long before the alleged affair." Joanna let him talk. When it was our turn, she stood slowly. Deliberately. She had that unshakable calm, the kind that made you realize she didn't need to shout to win, she just needed to speak. She laid out the evidence one piece at a time. travel records, charges on our shared Amex, text messages with date stamps. One in particular, don't forget to call her later. She's starting to get suspicious. Sent from Marin to Clint, 5 weeks before I found them. Brent tried to object. Something about privacy, admissibility. The judge raised one hand. We'll allow it. I watched Clint's shoulders fold in. He didn't look at me once. We weren't even halfway through the documentation when Brent leaned over and whispered something to him. Clint nodded, jaw tight. Then Brent said, Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to explore alternative settlement options. Joanna smiled. That won't be necessary. We came prepared. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. 1 page. Printed on thick, ivory stock. The prenup. Signed. Notarized. Witnessed. Ironclad. And on that 1 page, in language so clear it might as well have been chiseled into stone, were the terms. Any extramarital relationship involving the petitioner's immediate family member shall forfeit all spousal claims to marital or individual assets and shall be held financially responsible for legal restitution. Clear. Unavoidable. And most importantly, their signatures at the bottom. Marin's, too. Clint's face changed. Not like in movies where people suddenly cry or beg, but in that quiet, soul-sinking way where you realize your entire plan just disintegrated. He stared at that page like it was the end of a bridge he'd thought would take him somewhere better, only to realize it dropped off into nothing. For the first time, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But that moment passed quickly. Because I remembered the hotel key card. The silence. The gaslighting. The smug brunch photos on Instagram. I remembered the years I bent myself into shapes to make him feel seen, appreciated, trusted, while he was busy drawing up his exit plan with the one person I never saw coming. So no sympathy. Just clarity. After the court session, I sat alone in my car for over an hour. Didn't even start the engine. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, feeling the weight of everything. It wasn't victory I felt. It was grief. Because even when you win, even when the law is on your side, and the proof is undeniable, you still lose something. You lose the version of your life you thought you had. You lose memories to bitterness. You lose time. Years. Trust. I stared at the steering wheel until my fingers started to cramp. Then I finally drove home. To my house that was no longer a home. The fallout didn't just hit Clint. It hit Marin too. Our parents cut her off. Not permanently, but it was clear something had fractured. I heard from a mutual cousin that Marin had moved out of the loft. That things with Clint weren't going so well once real life set in. I didn't care. Or at least, I told myself I didn't. She emailed me again. I didn't think it would last. I was lonely. You were always so put together. I just wanted to feel like someone chose me, too. That part hurt. Because it was honest. And because it made me realize how long the cracks in our relationship had been forming, even before Clint. Even when we were kids. Marin was always chasing something. Attention. Validation. Warmth. I gave her all I could. And when that wasn't enough, she took what she thought would be. I didn't write back. What could I say? You got what you wanted and it broke you? Or worse, I forgive you? No. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness is not the same as healing. It doesn't arrive on schedule. It doesn't come just because someone asks for it. Sometimes it comes quietly years later. And sometimes it doesn't. 3 months after court, the dust started to settle. The final ruling had come through. Clint was held to every word of the prenup. He owed a significant chunk in legal costs, was barred from touching any of the marital assets, and the condo he'd moved into with Marin, I found out later, was being sold off to cover debts from a joint credit line I had removed myself from just in time. Joanna called me after everything cleared. It's done, she said simply. He can't appeal. And if he tries, I'd welcome the paperwork. I thanked her. Not with the hollow politeness I'd used the first time I hired her. This time, I meant it. She didn't just protect my finances, she protected my sense of self. What I didn't tell her was that I still hadn't moved back into the house. It didn't feel right anymore. I rented a short-term place in Madrona, small, old, and full of character. The windows let in the morning sun in the kitchen, and on weekends, I could walk down to the lake. It was quiet there. People walked their dogs and didn't stare at their phones. It gave me room to think. I started unpacking things I hadn't touched in years. Boxes of journals. Letters. Old sketchbooks from my undergrad days, before project management swallowed my creative side whole. I even bought a set of charcoals from an art shop near Pike Place and started drawing again, slowly, awkwardly, like remembering how to use muscles I forgot I had. At first, I didn't know what I was drawing. But eventually, it was a woman sitting at a table alone. Not sad. Not broken. Just, still, settled, aware. Marin emailed again in late October. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a request. Could we meet? One time. Just to talk. She offered a place, a cafe in Ravenna we used to go to when we were teenagers. I almost deleted it. But I didn't. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and didn't answer. Not right away. 3 days later, I showed up. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, wringing her hands. She looked smaller somehow. Not thinner, just shrunk. Like the consequences had finally begun to register in her skin. Hey, she said. I sat down. There was a long silence. Then she said, you look good. I raised an eyebrow. Healthier. Clearer, I don't know. Just different. I didn't respond. She sighed. I messed up. I know that sounds empty. But it's true. I thought he loved me, or that he'd at least stay. But after court, he's been angry. Distant. Blames me. I watched her carefully. There was no triumph in me. No glee. But there also wasn't pity. I think I ruined everything, she added quietly. I nodded, finally. You didn't ruin me, I said. That was all. We didn't cry. We didn't hug. She paid for her coffee. I paid for mine. We walked out into the Seattle drizzle, and she said, do you think we'll ever be okay? I think we'll be what we are, I said. And that has to be enough. She nodded, like she understood. Or at least accepted it. We went our separate ways. By winter, I'd sold the old house. I didn't go back inside before closing. Didn't need to. I let go of the furniture, the bedding, the rugs, everything. I donated what I could. The rest, I boxed and shipped to Clint's attorney's office with a note that said, here's what you left behind. Take what you want. Sell the rest. Or let her decide. It was more than generous. But that's the thing about revenge. The most satisfying kind isn't serial. It's calm, measured, quiet. Like a locked door gently closing behind you. I bought a place in Bainbridge. Not flashy. Just a small craftsman with sea-worn steps and a porch where I could read in the morning with my coffee. I took the ferry on weekends at first, just to get used to the rhythm of the island. I liked how people waved to each other. How the air smelled sharper. One afternoon, as I unpacked the last of my things, I found a small envelope in the bottom of an old jewelry box. Inside was a note Clint had written me our first Christmas together. You make everything make sense. I didn't know what peace felt like until you. It was written in his messy, half-cursive scrawl. I sat with it for a moment. Then I lit a match and watched it burn, piece by piece, in the stone fireplace. 6 months later, I saw Clint again. Not in person. On my screen. Someone had sent me a link to a panel from a tech conference. He was one of the speakers. He looked older. Hair thinner. Eyes more sunken. He was smiling, but not really. His voice didn't have the same charge. I clicked off the video. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't matter anymore. People ask me now if I ever think about dating again. Sometimes I say maybe. Sometimes I say no. It depends on the day. But the truth is, I've already rebuilt something far more important than romance. I reclaimed my peace. My time. My voice. And maybe most satisfying of all, I rebuilt the version of myself I'd buried, the one who doesn't stay quiet when she's being stolen from. The one who speaks. Who creates. Who doesn't wait for someone else to choose her. She chooses herself. Every single day.